In this week's episode, there will be no guests, and I'll be revisiting my book, Inclusive 360, which came out almost 3 years ago. This is my first ever solo episode, so grab your favorite beverage and enjoy. Hey there, my name is Bernadette Smith, and I'm a keynote speaker and writer. My pronouns are she and her. Welcome to 5 Things in 15 Minutes, my weekly show where I bring good vibes to DEI. That is good vibes to diversity, equity, and inclusion with a little dash of corporate social responsibility. What I found is there are lots of news stories about what's going wrong in the world and lots of negative data. But there are also a lot of things going right. That's what I like to focus on. I search for stories that we can be inspired by and learn from. My hope is to inspire you to experiment with some of these actions and policies to help you build a more inclusive world. Folks, I didn't write a 5 things last week on account of the holiday, but I challenged myself to continue with the podcast. So this is my first ever solo episode. I was talking to Rita on my team, and she suggested that I answer the question, what's the future of DEI? Yes, I could definitely handle that one. I wrote the book on it. This time 3 years ago, I was in the final edits of my book, Inclusive 360, and with lots of bad vibes and negative headlines, including Tractor Supply Company's dismantling of its DEI program, it can almost feel that that book is from a different, deeply more idealistic time. But it's not. My book is for right now. Now, I'll be honest, the headlines are right to an extent. My firm's sales are down from 2 years ago, but part of that is because many organizations are becoming Inclusive 360. They're relying less on external DEI support. They're starting to understand that part of DEI is about shifting the culture. Inclusive 360 is about embedding equity and inclusion into an organization's systems, into all of its functions, everything from the talent lifecycle to meeting planning, procurement, and product development. It's full of positive examples, many of which I've covered in the 5 Things newsletter or here on 5 and 15. In my conversations with organizations, many have already taken a bunch of steps to reduce bias in hiring and promoting. Many have taken steps to diversify their talent pipeline. Many companies are celebrating heritage months. They're working on it. Yes, there's a long way to go. But Inclusive 360 provides a fabulous roadmap on ways to go even deeper. There are ideas in there you can experiment with in every function of your organization. So what's the future of DEI? It's becoming Inclusive 360. It's about making DEI the default. I would be totally cool going out of business if the work was done, right? If it became the default. So in this 5 Things in 15 Minutes solo episode, I'm going to read to you a little from my book, Inclusive 360. Chapter 5. True Colors. Every voice matters. Increase your representation. In 2020, Starbucks released an award-winning ad in the United Kingdom that tells the story of a transgender person with a buzz cut and nose ring who goes through life being misgendered and referred to by their dead name, Gemma. A dead name is the transgender person's name given at birth. That old name is used by a letter carrier, over a loudspeaker in a waiting room, and by the person's dad at a party. The name was also on their ID card. The misgendering continues until they order their coffee at Starbucks, and they're asked for their name. "It's James," said the actor in the commercial. James's face lights up when the name is called out by the Starbucks barista. In a press release, Starbucks said the ad was, quote, inspired by real-life experiences of people who were transitioning. We discovered that they found Starbucks stores to be a safe space where their new name was accepted and they could be recognized as who they are. That, my friends, is representation. And that matters to not just transgender people, but all marginalized people. To feel seen and represented in media is not something that happens every day for people with marginalized identities. In a similar move, the new face of Everlast Boxing is Patricio Manuel, who happens to be a transgender man. He's the first transgender boxer to compete professionally and is the star of Everlast's Be First campaign. Quote, at a time when transgender people are being questioned whether we have a place in the sporting world or even being recognized by the world at large, for Everlast to endorse me is huge, Manuel told CNN. It's a bold statement, and I think it personifies the saying, be first. I really hope it pushes other companies to think outside the box. This world is so incredibly diverse. We all deserve to have our identities and stories highlighted. End quote. Representation doesn't mean adding the token Black person into a photo shoot. Authentic representation is about storytelling, about showing diverse folks as multidimensional. That's what matters. Alan Jope, who's former CEO of Unilever, pointed out that brands that engage in, quote, woke washing by using the language and imagery of marginalized communities to increase sales without actually advocating for those communities should not be tolerated. Jope added, quote, purpose-led brand communications is not just a matter of make them cry, make them buy. It's about action in the world, end quote. Heat, a Deloitte agency, studied the ads from 50 brands in 8 industries over 2 years and discovered that traditionally underrepresented people are increasingly visible in ads. Beyond that, those brands that feature the most people of color and women in ads averaged a 44% stock increase over those 2 years. In short, diverse representation matters to your bottom line. There are lots of ways you can expand diverse representation in your organization. But first, you have to establish your baseline. You can do this by following the ARC. Folks, the ARC method is a tool I created to help you move from problem to solution to get clarity in any situation. And the ARC method stands for ask, respect, connect. So in my book, I introduce the ARC method in a whole bunch of different contexts. We always start with the A, the ask. Within your organization, ask the hard questions such as, when was the last time we held an employee listening session? Who are the artists whose works hang in our offices? What do the people in our marketing materials look like? Do our products represent and serve all people, including people as diverse as Black transgender women with disabilities? That's the A, the ask. Then we move on to the R, respect. Respect the answers you find when you start reviewing your materials for diverse representation. Actively listen to the numbers and the data. Don't dismiss whatever you uncover, even if you don't like what you find, and especially if you don't like what you find. Respect that this is process for change. That's the R, respect. C is connect. Connect these answers to solutions where more of your customers and employees see themselves represented in your products and marketing. Connect your employees to each other to hold open conversations. You can use the ARC method to guide your organization towards increased diverse representation. Follow the ARC. Ask, respect, connect. Move from problem to solution. Folks, listen to your employees. Organizations are full of differences, and we all bring some of our personal baggage with us wherever we go. But underrepresented folks might bring trauma to work that's related to external factors, such as the hate crimes against Asian Americans exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, xenophobia experienced by Muslims after September 11th, and still, shootings of Black people by police officers, anti-LGBTQ legislation. It's hard for these folks to just leave that trauma at home. And with increasingly blurry lines between home and work, the workplace must become a place where conversations around these topics are safe. Many organizations began their journey towards anti-racism and racial justice when George Floyd was murdered by a Minneapolis police officer in May 2020. One organization after the other made public condemnations of the murder and public commitments to anti-racism. It was about time. While it took until 2020 for many organizations to make public condemnations and commitments, several years earlier, after an innocent Black man named Botham Jean was killed by police in Dallas, PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, launched Courageous Conversations. Jean was a PwC employee. Courageous Conversations is a facilitated forum/listening series where employees can address difficult issues, hear diverse perspectives, share their own perspectives, and say what needs to be said. The initiative was spearheaded by PwC Chairman Tim Ryan. Courageous Conversation participants must attend and commit to 6 actions. Be open, authentic, engaged, comfortable being uncomfortable, non-judgmental, and understanding. The goal is to create brave environments for open, honest, and respectful dialogue. These conversations are not easy and sometimes uncomfortable, Ryan wrote in an email, which he shared with Huffington Post. But one thing I've heard this week is that it's also uncomfortable when the issues that are on top of our minds are not part of the conversation at work. The first Courageous Conversation was around race, with the goal to equip the workforce with the skills and techniques to have effective conversations in the workplace around topics that may be outside of their comfort zone. Other topics have included gender dynamics, LGBTQ+ inclusion, current events, and more. Quote, discussing these types of difficult topics is usually assumed to be the responsibility of community leaders, politicians, and activists, Ryan wrote on LinkedIn. But our people spend a good portion of their lives within the walls of this firm. And more than anything, I want them to be able to bring their whole selves to work. Since PwC's precedent, hundreds of other organizations, large and small, have hosted facilitated listening series. Now, these sessions can help your organization gather qualitative data that you can combine with any quantitative assessments to establish a baseline for your DEI initiatives. A trained facilitator can be valuable for the session so you don't burden underrepresented talent with the emotional labor and possible re-traumatization of facilitating these sessions themselves. Now, this is Bernadette in 2024 interceding, just adding to this because when was the last time your organization has held one of these around racial justice or something else? Your folks are probably burnt out. It might be time to hold a new listening session. Include diverse representation in marketing. Showcasing diversity is a best practice for any business. The more diversity a brand showcases, not just in its marketing, but even throughout its website, the more diverse employees and customers they are likely to attract. Showcasing diversity makes others feel more welcome and included. It provides possibility models, especially to underrepresented people who don't often see themselves in ads. In 2020, Ultra Running announced a sponsorship of 2 new athletes, and they were both pregnant women. These runners appear in Ultra ads, but unlike other brands, they're not required to compete a specific number of times or to medal in order to keep their sponsorship. The package Ultra athletes Alicia Montano and Tina Muir receive includes financial compensation and shoes in exchange for press appearances. This decision by Ultra sets a new standard in an industry with a reputation for penalizing pregnant women. Montano's former sponsor, ASICS, reduced her pay and later withdrew financial support during a previous pregnancy. She hopes that being open about the issues mothers face, both within and outside the world of sports, will help companies understand these problems and work towards solutions like robust maternity policies. More brands are also paying attention to the importance of plus-size inclusion. In 2019, the Nike store in London displayed new mannequins representing diverse body types. Shoppers loved the parasport and curvy mannequins, which show that there's more than one way to be athletic. Similarly, both Old Navy and Nordstrom started using curvy mannequins as well. Misguided, a British fashion brand, even used mannequins from diverse ethnic groups, some of whom rocked stretch marks, freckles, and vitiligo. These are people and characteristics that are almost never reflected in marketing. It's powerful to finally see them in promotions. Procter & Gamble was celebrated for several of their commercials. The Talk, which showcased Black parents explaining the realities of racial bias to their kids over time, was well supported. Then the company went on to produce The Look, which shows a day in the life of a Black man and his experiences with microaggressions and profiling. Both commercials beautifully and painfully illustrate common Black experiences in America and build more awareness and empathy among well-meaning people who might not otherwise have this exposure. Mapbox was disappointed in the lack of representation of queer folks in stock photos, and as a tech company, particularly wanted to see queer folks represented in tech. Because of this, Mapbox created a collection of free stock photos of queer people in tech that is available for everyone to access. In its blog post, Mapbox says, "We created this photo set to promote the visibility of queer and gender nonconforming people in technology who are often underrepresented as workers powering the creative, technical, and business leadership of groundbreaking tech companies and products. We created these images to encourage and enable everyone in tech to represent LGBTQIA plus people at work." Okay, it's Bernadette from 2024 again. There's more. There's a lot more. And, I was only reading about representation in this section, but I hope that you check out the book. I hope that you see it as relevant more than ever. I'm going to make sure you put a link in the show notes. You can get it on audiobook as well, but check out Inclusive 360. Thank you so much for all you do to build a more inclusive world. Thank you for listening to 5 Things in 15 Minutes. I hope you found yourself inspired by at least one of this week's stories. If you did, would you mind sharing it with a colleague and leaving us a review on your favorite podcasting platform? And if you don't already get my 5 Things newsletter, join at 5thingsdei.com. I'm Bernadette Smith, and I'll see you next week right here for 5 Things in 15 Minutes, bringing good vibes to DEI.